Hi guys, welcome back. Um, so hopefully you've either had a break or if you wanted to, you could carry on painting. Um, what we're going to be doing this session, what I want you to mostly do is focus on your flowers and leaves for maybe like half the session or so. Primarily we're going to be neatening maybe a bit more than half the session. I might spend the last sort of 15-20 minutes just going back and tweaking some of the skull forms that I wasn't entirely happy with. But I want to spend a bit of time on these, in my particular piece, these leaves, just starting to kind of be a bit more specific with their shapes and sort of separating out from the general sort of mass that I have of leaves at the moment. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to give my palette a little bit of a clean. Pop this up here actually. Use my palette knife just to scrape any excess. It's useful to scrape excess with your palette knife just because then you don't have to wipe as much off with your rag or towel, tissue towel. And then dipping some of your medium, you can use that to just start to wipe back. You want to get most of it wiped clean, because otherwise it's going to mix too much into the greens as we start to mix them. And they're quite sensitive greens, so we want to make sure you've got a fairly clean palette to start mixing them. Obviously, if you've got space on your palette, don't worry about doing this, but I've not got tons, so that's what I need to clean off. Yeah, that's fine, Anne. We'll probably the last kind of 15-20 minutes, you can paint back into it a bit. I'll talk about that a bit actually, because there are some sections of mine that I want to paint back into as well. But for the time being, just move into your leaves a bit, and then we'll come back to it. You'll also have an opportunity to make it brighter again next week. So one of the advantages of layering in the way that we are, you can always sort of keep lifting your colors, or if things get too muddy, you can kind of paint, you can mix sort of purer, brighter colors that you paint over the top again. And next week things will be dry, so you won't get that sort of where things blend in and they become muddy because you're blending too many things in together. That won't be an issue. So that's why this kind of gradual building process works well. And also with oils, don't worry too much about things being sort of set in stone, because they're not. You can always correct stuff. It's one of the advantages of oils. So as long as you know it's sort of muddy and you can see how you want to correct it, don't worry if there's too much paint on the panel or the canvas today. We'll be able to go back in and correct next week as well. And if you carried on working beyond next week, you can keep making corrections. So I've cleaned my palette off. I'm going to stick a little bit more Prussian blue out because I'm going to be doing a fair bit of green mixing, I think. Might pop a little bit of cad yellow out as well. Should have enough white. And then, similar to my palette, I want to clean off my brushes that I was using. can use the same, pretty much the same set of brushes. So this was the 4 that I had been using. They're all the smaller ones, sort of small rounds and flats. And these are generally pretty good for any kind of, this sort of size brush and type of brush is a good foliage or a good leaf, good flower brush to work with. There's actually if you're interested in some high quality brushes, I think they still sell it, but Rosemary & Co. Brushes has a good, I think it's Michael Klein, the painter Michael Klein, his set of botanical brushes. I think they're like a pink color or something, but that's a good set of flower brushes if you can get hold of them. I'm just going to grab some of my cleaning spirits just to clean my brushes off. They're quite an affordable set of brushes. I think they're about 18 or 20 quid for about 5 brushes, which is quite good. And they're all about this size. You obviously don't have to like totally clean your brushes off. Just get rid of the sort of greys that are going to mostly be blocking them up right now. And luckily, because they're so small as well, they're not hard to clean. It's always harder to clean bigger brushes because they carry more paint. So once they're roughly clean, my camera pointed. So I'm going to work again sort of from the top of the image down. I'm just trying to think, maybe I'm just going to zoom out slightly. So you can see all the leaves there. So I'm going to work roughly again, sort of in an arc from, for me, for the top left going down towards the bottom right. If you're left-handed, you can do the opposite. And as I say, you don't have to, you can use a mile stick. But I'm going to try to avoid using a mile stick just so you guys can see exactly what I'm doing. What I recommend with things like leaves, flowers, any situation where you've got a lot of little complex shapes, because this is very different from working in the skull. The skull is one complex single form that has all these sort of undulations and they all connect together, and some parts of it are softer, some parts of it are harder. They sort of wrap around themselves, those sorts of things going on in the skull. That's not what's happening with the leaves. So the leaves is one continuous set of ivy, but they're all distinct little individual ivy leaves that we're painting. And what I find works best, bearing in mind you don't have to be absolutely accurate, like you don't have to map every single leaf in exactly the right place. That doesn't matter. You just want to give the right impression of the leaves. What I usually like to do is I like to pick out sort of some landmark leaves. So if I swing my camera across a bit, this top leaf here matches this leaf in the reference, or there's this leaf that sticks out on the right-hand side, or there's this little leaf here that matches that leaf there. And they might not be identical. They might not be identical to each other from your initial blocking. Like mine was really roughly scrubbed in. But hopefully you can pick them out. And then what we're going to do is we're going to paint those leaves in accurately and then start to fill other kind of important leaves in the midst of those. But they're going to be our kind of starting point. And usually there'll be something about those leaves that compositionally stands out. So like, as I say, this leaf up here is quite important. It sort of sits over the top of everything. This leaf that sort of, as I said, is a little bit like an umbrella, sort of slopes over itself. That's an interesting little shape as well. So we'll start doing that. And as I say, we'll start from working from left to right. So there's a group of leaves on the left-hand side. So I'll swivel my camera slightly. Group of leaves here that I don't have in at all, actually. And I'm going to leave them out for now. I'm just going to focus on these two leaves, get them blocked in, and then I'll fill those leaves in later. Let's try to get my camera in a good position for capturing everything. So I'll start with this leaf here. And I'm going to zoom in on my reference, which if you can is a useful thing to be able to do. And I'm going to try to remember my color mixtures. So I know that my base mixture last week was Prussian blue, some cad yellow, which is the basic sort of green mixture. And generally this ivy is kind of yellowish. So sometimes greens are more sort of blue greens. And I think if you're working from the little girl's face, those leaves are more sort of cool blue-green leaves. A lot of the ivy, the lighter portions of the ivy are more yellowish. The darker portions do go a bit cooler, so we'll be looking for shifts between more blue or more yellow. So I'm going to start just by trying to place. So that's too dark, what I've painted in. So I'm sort of orienting myself a bit again with getting my values right. But I'm using what I already had down from last week as my starting point. So I know I just have to effectively match what I've already painted in from last week. And I can use one of my other brushes to just mix up a bit of background color. Because there will be times where I need to go in and just correct the shape of the leaf. I can't always correct the shape of the leaf by sort of overpainting. Sometimes I need to use the background to sort of work around it. So I can cut back into the shape with my background value. So I just use this background color to cut around the leaf, just alter its shape. And with these variegated leaves, we've got the sort of darker internal colours and the lighter tones. And as I say, the lighter portions of them tend a bit more yellow, so you can mix a bit more cadmium yellow if you're working on those leaves. But that's the sort of thing you're looking for. So if you're working from the other paintings, if I go back to some of the other ones, you're looking for some of the, depending on whether you're seeing the back side of the flowers in this one, for instance, you might see more reddishness, and then if the flowers are opened at us, they're more yellow, that sort of difference. Or some portions of the dried flowers in this one, they tend towards being more, again, that the outside of the petal will be a bit lighter and the inside will be more of a deep purple. So those sorts of relationships you're looking for with those ones. But it shouldn't get too complex. Again, it's a bit like when we were working on the skull. Our variables are primarily, at the moment at least for these lighter tones, primarily just how much cadmium yellow, how much Prussian blue, and how much white. We are going to get into some sort of slightly more subtle mixtures. I would get a different brush that you can do your darker greens with, and that darker green might incorporate a bit of burnt umber with Prussian blue. Sometimes is a good green, a little bit of the cad yellow added. If you just mix cad yellow with Prussian blue, it will so it's going to be limited in terms of how dark it can possibly go. So the burnt umber can be useful just for mixing a darker green without having to, if you add black to a darker green, it's going to go grayish. So you'll find that the Prussian blue and burnt umber work well. So that's about enough detail for this this stage of the painting for today, for each individual leaf. So something like that's pretty good. Before I move sort of up to the left for my next leaf, I'm just going to pop in this other one that I mentioned. You only really see the flat of it on that left-hand edge. But again, it's quite an important sort of almost like a boundary point. Try my best not to block your view. Bearing in mind with the background, you want to match whatever particular part of the background you're painting over. So there was that gradient we put into the background. So some parts of the background will be sort of, as you go down the image, generally will be a bit darker. That's something we'll also go back over next week. One of the last things we'll do actually will be working on the background. So that's sufficient for that one. It's pretty simple, that shape, but I just wanted to get it in to kind of make sure that was fully established on that left-hand edge. Just trying to see if there's anything worth emphasizing. I think there is this like almost butterfly shaped leaf that I've got just above the skull here, which it's pretty much all one tone. I'm just going to block it in as a sort of quite lurid green. So mostly cadmium yellow. And just get its shape in place. And I'm also thinking this one sort of touches on the skull, so I can then just drop back into the skull, get that little shadow that it casts onto the top of the skull in place as well. So that's just about that leaf blocked in. I'm not going to put all of the details. There is some sort of form stuff going on with it, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. I'll make sure the outside is sort of clear, so the outside shape of it is accurate. But the actual details we'll do next week. As I say, we've got four. Think about it. We've got 4 hours next week, so we don't have to worry too much about all the details within these leaves. But we just want to give a bit more specific structure to the gaps between them. It'll make rendering a lot easier when we get to it next week. So we can go up to the top now. This leaf up the top I'll work on. And again, it's just going to be a combination of sort of working within the leaf and just kind of shoring up its border. I think this one's actually not too bad border-wise. So we won't have to do too much painting the grey back in. I can probably get away with sort of just painting the leaf out a bit where necessary. It's not too bad for that leaf. I think you're getting a little bit of glare, hopefully not too much on the video. And then just dropping below that, again, I can sort of fiddle around slightly with the edge of this leaf behind it, just the background of it, just to start to establish a bit more sort of specific shape in those leaves as well. And it doesn't matter, you don't have to get absolutely everything in place. You don't have to get every single leaf in the painting, obviously, which is why we focus in more on the sort of the specific leaves that really catch your attention, because it means that if we don't get all of the other leaves in, it probably won't make a huge difference. The overall impact of the piece, like the meaning, will remain the same, most likely, or the composition. I mean, it might even sometimes make the composition better if you leave things out. If it seems a bit cluttered, the amount of leaves that you have or the number of flowers, just put the ones that really stand out to you, and then sort of fill in as you need to.